At the family company, I overheard my son-in-law whispering to the secretary, "Marry me or lose your job." I walked away quietly as if I hadn't heard anything. The next day, at the partners meeting, I prepared a very special presentation. He never saw the downfall coming. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I never imagined that a simple trip to retrieve forgotten contracts would shatter everything I believed about my family. At 58, I thought I had seen enough of human nature to not be surprised anymore. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday evening, around 7:30, when I realized I'd left the Henderson contracts in my office. My wife Margaret was already in bed with one of her migraines, and I figured a quick trip to the office wouldn't hurt. The building was supposed to be empty. Most of our employees left by 6, and Tyler, my son-in-law, had mentioned he was taking Pamela out for dinner to celebrate their 3rd wedding anniversary. The security guard waved me through with a sleepy nod. I've been coming to this building for over 20 years, ever since I founded Henderson & Associates Financial Consulting. Every corner, every hallway holds memories of the company I built from nothing, the legacy I hope to pass down to my daughter Pamela. As I rode the elevator to the 4th floor, I felt that familiar sense of pride. This wasn't just a business. It was proof that a kid from a working-class neighborhood in Detroit could build something meaningful. I'd always dreamed that one day Pamela would take over, maybe with Tyler by her side. They seemed like the perfect couple. Tyler with his MBA from Northwestern, his polished manner, his way of making everyone in the room feel important. The elevator doors opened with their usual soft ding. The executive floor was dimly lit, with only the emergency lighting casting long shadows down the hallway. I could hear my footsteps echoing on the marble floor as I walked toward my corner office. That's when I heard voices coming from Tyler's office. My first instinct was confusion. Hadn't Tyler said he was taking Pamela to dinner? Maybe plans had changed. I was about to call out a greeting when something in the tone of the conversation made me stop. There was an edge to Tyler's voice I'd never heard before, something that made my stomach tighten with unease. I found myself moving closer to his office door, which was slightly ajar. I know I should have announced my presence, should have knocked, but something primal told me to listen first. "You know what this means, don't you, Emma?" Tyler's voice was low, controlled, but there was something predatory in it that made my skin crawl. "Please, Mr. Hoffman, I need this job." Emma's voice was barely above a whisper, trembling with fear. Emma Rodriguez had been our administrative assistant for 2 years, a single mother of 2 young children, always the first to arrive and last to leave. She was 24, hard-working, and had never given us a moment's trouble. "I'm sure you do," Tyler replied, and I could hear him moving around the office. "Supporting 2 kids on your own can't be easy, especially with rent going up everywhere." "I've never done anything wrong," Emma said, her voice breaking slightly. "My performance reviews have always been excellent. Mr. Henderson has never had any complaints about my work." Tyler chuckled, and the sound made my blood run cold. It wasn't the warm laugh I'd heard at family dinners, the one that made Pamela's eyes light up. This was something else entirely. "This isn't about your work performance, sweetheart. This is about us, about what we could have together." I pressed myself against the wall outside his office, my heart pounding so hard I was afraid they might hear it. This couldn't be happening. Not Tyler, not the man who married my daughter, who sat at our dinner table every Sunday, who called me Dad with what I thought was genuine affection. "I'm not interested in a relationship, Mr. Hoffman. I'm here to work, nothing more." Emma's voice was stronger now, but I could still hear the fear underneath. "See, that's where you're wrong," Tyler said, and his voice had gone completely cold. "You're here because I allow you to be here. And if you want to stay here, if you want to keep supporting those beautiful children of yours, then you need to understand how things work." The silence that followed was deafening. I could barely breathe as I waited for what came next. "I'm offering you something special, Emma, a chance to be with someone who can take care of you, who can make sure you never have to worry about money again. All you have to do is say yes." "But you're married," Emma whispered. "You're married to Mr. Henderson's daughter." Another laugh, this one bitter. What Pamela doesn't know won't hurt her. And what Nathan doesn't know definitely won't hurt him. This is between you and me. I felt like I was drowning. The man I'd welcomed into my family, the man I trusted with my daughter's happiness and my company's future, was standing 10 feet away from me, blackmailing a young employee into a relationship. "I can't," Emma said, and I heard her chair scrape against the floor as if she was trying to back away. "I won't. I'll quit before I—" "You'll quit?" Tyler's voice cut through her words like a knife. "And go where? Do what? You think anyone in this industry will hire you without a reference from me? You think you'll find another job that pays $38,000 a year with full benefits and flexible hours for when your kids are sick?" The silence stretched on, and I could practically feel Emma's desperation through the wall. She was trapped, and Tyler knew it. "Here's what's going to happen," Tyler continued, his voice almost conversational now. "You're going to think about what I've offered. You're going to think about your children, about their future, about the roof over their heads and the food on their table. And tomorrow morning, you're going to come to my office and give me your answer." "And if I say no?" Emma's voice was barely audible. "Then I'll have to let you go. Budget cuts, you understand. Nothing personal. Of course, I'll have to be honest in any reference calls about why your employment was terminated. Insubordination is such an ugly word, isn't it?" I heard Emma's sharp intake of breath, followed by the sound of her gathering her things. My mind was reeling, trying to process what I just heard. This wasn't just sexual harassment. This was psychological torture, emotional blackmail of the cruelest kind. "Think carefully, Emma. Your children are counting on you to make the right choice." I heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly moved away, ducking into the supply closet just as Emma emerged from Tyler's office. Even in the dim light, I could see she was crying, her whole body shaking as she hurried toward the elevator. I waited until I heard the elevator doors close before stepping out of the closet. Tyler's office was quiet now, but I could see light still spilling from under his door. Part of me wanted to storm in there, to confront him immediately, to demand an explanation. But something held me back. Maybe wisdom, maybe cowardice, I'm still not sure which. Instead, I stood there in the empty hallway, my mind racing with questions that felt like physical blows. How long had this been going on? Were there other employees Tyler had approached? And the question that hurt most of all, what kind of man had my daughter married? I thought about Pamela, probably sitting in some restaurant right now, smiling across the table at the man she loved, completely unaware that her husband was a predator. The same hands that held hers tenderly were being used to threaten and manipulate vulnerable employees. I forgot all about the Henderson contracts. I forgot about everything except the sick feeling in my stomach as I made my way back to the elevator. The building that had always felt like a second home now felt contaminated, poisoned by what I'd witnessed. As I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, I kept replaying Tyler's words in my mind. The calculated cruelty of it, the way he'd used Emma's children against her, the casual dismissal of his marriage to my daughter. It all painted a picture of a man I didn't recognize, had never seen before. But the worst part was the growing realization that maybe I had seen signs and chosen to ignore them. The way Tyler sometimes looked at the younger female employees, the comments he made about women that I dismissed as harmless jokes, the subtle way he seemed to undermine Pamela's confidence while appearing supportive. When I pulled into my driveway, the house was dark except for the porch light Margaret always left on for me. She would be sleeping by now, trusting that her husband had simply gone to retrieve some paperwork. How could I tell her what I discovered? How could I tell anyone? I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the house where I'd raised Pamela, where we'd welcomed Tyler as a son, where we'd celebrated their engagement with such joy. Everything felt different now, tainted by the knowledge of who Tyler really was. Tomorrow, Emma would have to make an impossible choice, and I would have to decide what kind of man I was going to be. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Emma's trembling voice, saw the calculation in Tyler's words. By 5 in the morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, staring at my phone and trying to decide what to do. Margaret found me there when she came down for breakfast. Even after 32 years of marriage, she could read my moods better than anyone. "You look terrible," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "Did something happen at the office last night?" I wanted to tell her everything. Margaret had always been my sounding board, the person who helped me see situations clearly when my emotions clouded my judgment. But how could I explain what I'd overheard without destroying her image of Tyler? She adored him, had from the moment Pamela brought him home. She often said he reminded her of me when I was younger, ambitious, charming, devoted to family. "Just some complications with the Henderson account," I lied, hating myself for it. "Nothing that can't be sorted out." She studied my face for a moment longer, then squeezed my hand. "You'll figure it out. You always do." If only she knew what I was really trying to figure out. I arrived at the office early, before even Emma usually got there. I needed time to think, to plan, to decide how to handle this situation without destroying everything I'd built. The security guard seemed surprised to see me so early 2 days in a row, but he just nodded and waved me through. The executive floor felt different in the morning light, less ominous than it had the night before, but I couldn't shake the memory of what had happened in Tyler's office. I went to my own office and tried to focus on work, but every sound in the hallway made me look up, wondering if it was Emma arriving, wondering what choice she'd made. She came in at exactly 8 o'clock, just like always. I watched through my office window as she made her way to her desk, her movements careful and controlled. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Her usual bright smile was nowhere to be seen, replaced by a hollow expression that made my chest ache. Tyler arrived at 8:15, breezing through the office with his typical confidence. He stopped by Emma's desk, just for a moment, just long enough to lean down and say something that made her face go pale. Then he continued to his office as if nothing had happened. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know if this was an isolated incident or part of a pattern. I had to know who Tyler really was, beyond the charming facade he'd shown my family. I started with our HR files. As the owner, I had access to everything, though I'd rarely used that privilege. I pulled Tyler's employment record first, looking for anything I might have missed during his hiring process 3 years ago. On paper, Tyler Hoffman looked perfect. MBA from Northwestern, excellent references from his previous job at Morrison Financial Group, glowing recommendation letters that painted him as professional, dedicated, and ethical. But as I read more carefully, I noticed something odd. His tenure at Morrison had been relatively short, only 18 months, for someone who'd been promoted twice. I decided to make some calls. Morrison Financial Group, this is Janet speaking. Hi Janet, this is Nathan Henderson from Henderson & Associates. I'm calling to verify some employment information for Tyler Hoffman. He worked there from January 2019 to June 2020. There was a pause. I'll need to transfer you to HR for employment verification. 3 transfers later, I was speaking to a woman named Linda who seemed hesitant to discuss Tyler at all. I can confirm his dates of employment and position, she said carefully, but I'm not authorized to discuss the circumstances of his departure. Circumstances? I pressed. He left for a better opportunity, according to his resume. Another pause. Mr. Henderson, I really can't discuss personnel matters. But if you're considering him for a position involving supervision of female employees, you might want to speak directly with our former HR director, Patricia Walsh. She's retired now, but she might be willing to speak with you off the record. My stomach dropped. Linda gave me Patricia's number, and I called immediately. Patricia Walsh had a tired voice, the kind that comes from dealing with too many difficult situations over the years. When I explained why I was calling, she sighed deeply. "Tyler Hoffman," she said. "I was wondering when someone would call about him." "What do you mean?" "Look, Mr. Henderson, I can't give you specifics because of legal reasons, but I can tell you that Tyler's departure from Morrison wasn't entirely voluntary. There were complaints, multiple complaints from female employees about inappropriate behavior. I felt sick." "What kind of complaints?" "The kind that starts with unwanted attention and escalates to using work assignments and performance reviews as leverage for personal favors. We couldn't prove anything definitive. Tyler was very careful, very smart about it, but the pattern was there. Why wasn't this in his employment record?" Patricia laughed bitterly. "Because Tyler was smart enough to resign before we could build a formal case, and because our legal department was terrified of a wrongful termination lawsuit. He left with a neutral reference and a severance package that included a non-disclosure agreement." "So he just moved on to another company?" "Companies like yours," she said quietly. "Smaller firms that might not dig as deep, might be impressed by his credentials and charm. I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson. I wish I could have done more at the time." After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at Tyler's employee file. Everything made sense now. The way he charmed us during the interview process, his eagerness to take on responsibilities that involved managing female staff, his quick rise within our company structure. I thought about Pamela, about how excited she'd been when they started dating. Tyler had pursued her aggressively, sending flowers to her office, taking her to expensive restaurants, making grand romantic gestures that she'd interpreted as devotion. Now I wondered if she'd simply been another conquest, another step in his plan to position himself within a family business. Around noon, I decided to take a walk through the office, something I did regularly to stay connected with my employees. But today, I was watching for something specific. I was watching how Tyler interacted with the women on our staff. What I saw made my skin crawl. With the older women like Susan in accounting who'd been with us for 15 years, Tyler was professional but distant. But with the younger women, Emma, Jennifer from marketing, Sarah the new paralegal, his behavior was different. He stood too close when talking to them. He found excuses to touch their shoulders or arms. He made comments about their appearance that rode the line between compliment and something more inappropriate. I watched him corner Jennifer by the copy machine, leaning against it to block her exit while he talked to her about a project that could have been discussed via email. I saw how she kept trying to step away, how her smile became strained, how she finally escaped by claiming she had an urgent call to take. But the worst was watching Emma. Every time Tyler approached her desk, she tensed up like a rabbit sensing a predator. She avoided eye contact, kept her answers short and professional, and I could see her hands shaking when she thought no one was looking. During lunch, I made another call, this one to a private investigator I'd used occasionally for business matters. Bill Morrison was a former police detective who specialized in background checks that went deeper than the standard employment screening. "I need you to look into someone for me," I told him. "Tyler Hoffman, married to my daughter, works for my company. I have reason to believe he might have a history of inappropriate workplace behavior. How deep do you want me to go?" "As deep as necessary. I need to know who this man really is. Give me a week." I spent the rest of the afternoon watching Tyler, taking note of every interaction, every moment when his professional mask slipped just slightly. By the time he left for the day, making sure to stop by Emma's desk one more time, leaning down to say something that made her face go white, I had seen enough to know that what I'd witnessed the night before wasn't an isolated incident. Tyler Hoffman was a predator, and somehow I'd welcomed him into my family and given him access to vulnerable employees who depended on me to protect them. That evening, I sat in my study trying to figure out my next move. Across town, Tyler was probably having dinner with Pamela, playing the role of the devoted husband while she talked about her day, completely unaware of the man sitting across from her. I thought about calling the police, but I knew what Patricia Walsh had said about proof. Tyler was careful, smart enough to operate in gray areas where his actions could be interpreted as merely overly friendly rather than threatening. And Emma hadn't actually been assaulted. She'd been psychologically manipulated, which was harder to prosecute. But there was something I could do, something that would protect Emma and any other women Tyler might target while also protecting my daughter from the devastating truth about her husband. I just had to be smart about it, smarter than Tyler. The phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. It was Pamela. "Hi, Dad," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Tyler and I were just talking about having you and Mom over for dinner this weekend. He has some ideas about expanding the business that he wants to run by you." I gripped the phone tighter. Ideas about expanding? He's been working on a proposal to add more staff, maybe open a branch office. He's so ambitious, Dad. You should see how excited he gets when he talks about the future of the company. The future of the company. My company. The business I'd built with my own hands, that I'd hoped to pass down to my daughter. And Tyler was already making plans for it, plans that probably involved removing me from the picture entirely. "That sounds interesting," I managed to say. "I'd love to hear his ideas." "Great. How about Saturday night? I'll make that roast you love." "We'll be there," I said, though the thought of sitting across a dinner table from Tyler, pretending everything was normal, made me feel nauseated. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my study, thinking about Saturday night. Tyler would present his plans with that charming smile, that confident manner that had fooled us all for so long. He'd talk about the future while knowing that he was destroying the present, manipulating employees by day and coming home to my daughter by night. But I would be ready for him. By Saturday, I would know exactly who Tyler Hoffman really was. And then I would decide what kind of father, what kind of man I was going to be. The battle lines were drawn. Tyler just didn't know it yet. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that usually made me feel optimistic about the future. But as Margaret and I drove to Pamela and Tyler's house in the suburbs, all I felt was a knot of dread in my stomach that had been growing tighter all week. Bill Morrison had called that morning with his preliminary findings. Tyler's background was even worse than I'd imagined. 3 previous jobs, 3 quiet departures, always under circumstances involving female employees. A pattern of behavior that stretched back almost 8 years, carefully hidden behind non-disclosure agreements and neutral references. "You seem nervous," Margaret observed as we pulled into their driveway. The house was a beautiful colonial that Tyler had insisted they buy in an upscale neighborhood, financed, I now realized, largely by the generous salary I'd been paying him. "Just thinking about work," I lied, though it wasn't entirely untrue. I was thinking about work, specifically about how Tyler had been using his position to prey on employees while I remained obliviously proud of my son-in-law's professional success. Pamela opened the door before we could knock, her face glowing with the kind of happiness that made my heart ache. She was wearing a blue dress that brought out her eyes. Her hair styled the way she'd worn it as a little girl. At 31, she still looked so young to me, so trusting. "Mom, Dad." She hugged us both tightly. "Come in. Tyler's in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on dinner. He's been cooking all afternoon." Tyler emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron over his dress shirt, a wooden spoon in his hand. The perfect picture of a devoted husband preparing a meal for his family. If I hadn't known what I knew, I might have been touched by the domesticity of it all. "Nathan, Margaret." He embraced us both warmly, and I had to force myself not to recoil from his touch. "I hope you're hungry. I've been experimenting with some new recipes." "It smells wonderful," Margaret said, and she meant it. Whatever Tyler's faults, he was an excellent cook. "Tyler's been taking cooking classes," Pamela said proudly, "every Thursday night. He says it helps him relax after work." Thursday nights. I made a mental note to ask Bill Morrison to look into what Tyler was really doing on Thursday evenings. The pattern of lies was becoming clearer. Small deceptions that painted him as a devoted husband while he lived an entirely different life. Dinner was indeed excellent. Herb-crusted lamb with roasted vegetables and a wine sauce that probably cost more than Emma made in a day. Tyler played the perfect host, keeping our glasses filled, asking about Margaret's garden club, laughing at all the right moments. Watching him perform this elaborate charade while knowing what he'd done to Emma made me feel sick. "So," Margaret said as Tyler served dessert, a complicated chocolate souffle that must have taken hours to prepare. "Pamela tells us you have some exciting ideas for the business." Tyler's eyes lit up with what looked like genuine enthusiasm. "I do, actually. I've been thinking a lot about Henderson and Associates and where we could take it in the next 5 to 10 years. Where we could take it, as if it were already his company. The financial consulting market is becoming incredibly competitive," Tyler continued, setting down his fork and leaning forward. "We need to think bigger, expand our services, maybe even consider going regional." "Regional expansion is expensive," I said carefully. "We'd need significant capital investment." "Exactly," Tyler smiled, that charming smile that had fooled us all. "Which is why I've been developing a comprehensive business plan. We could start by opening a branch office in Chicago, maybe bring in some younger consultants who understand the digital marketplace." "Younger consultants," I repeated. I couldn't help but think about Emma, about Jennifer, about all the young women Tyler would have access to in a larger operation. "The industry is changing, Nathan," Tyler said, and there was something in his tone now that made me pay closer attention. "Clients want advisors who understand modern financial instruments, who can speak their language. Sometimes experience can be limiting." Margaret and Pamela didn't seem to notice the subtle shift in his tone, but I heard it clearly. Tyler wasn't just talking about business expansion. He was talking about pushing me aside. "Dad built this company from nothing," Pamela said defensively, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "His experience is exactly why our clients trust us." Tyler's smile never wavered, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. "Of course, honey, I'm not suggesting your father doesn't have value. I'm just saying that maybe it's time to think about succession planning. Nathan won't want to work forever." "I'm 58, not 80, I said, keeping my voice level. "I plan to work for many more years." "Absolutely," Tyler said quickly, "but it's never too early to plan for the future. In fact, I've been thinking that you might enjoy taking a more advisory role. Less day-to-day management, more strategic oversight. Give you time to enjoy life, travel with Margaret." I felt Margaret's hand tighten on mine. She knew me well enough to recognize the danger signs, the way my jaw clenched when I was trying to control my temper, the careful stillness in my voice. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. Tyler reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I've prepared a detailed transition plan. Nothing dramatic, just a gradual shift of responsibilities. I could take over more of the client management, the staff oversight, the financial planning. You could focus on the big picture items." Staff oversight. The phrase made my blood run cold. Tyler wanted control over the employees, the same employees he was already manipulating and threatening. "I appreciate your initiative," I said carefully, "but I'm not ready to step back from active management." Tyler's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course not. This is just preliminary thinking. But Nathan, you have to admit that some of our procedures are a bit outdated. Our HR policies, for instance, could use updating. More flexibility in how we handle employee relations." "More flexibility in employee relations?" I wanted to grab him by the throat and demand he explain exactly what he meant by that, but Pamela was sitting right there, beaming at her husband's business acumen. "Tyler's been studying our employee handbook," Pamela said proudly. "He has some great ideas for making the workplace more, what did you call it, honey? More dynamic?" "Dynamic," Tyler repeated, his eyes never leaving mine. "Sometimes rigid policies can create unnecessarily hostile work environments. Employees need to understand that flexibility and cooperation are valued qualities. The conversation continued, but I barely heard it. Tyler was laying out his vision for my company, and it was a nightmare. Expanded operations that would give him access to more potential victims. Reduced oversight that would let him operate with impunity. Updated policies that would make it harder for employees to file complaints. And through it all, he sat there holding my daughter's hand, accepting her admiring glances, playing the role of the ambitious young executive with innovative ideas for the family business. "What do you think, Dad?" Pamela asked, and I realized I'd been silent for too long. "I think Tyler has put a lot of thought into this," I said diplomatically. "These are certainly ambitious plans." "Ambitious is good," Tyler said. "Sometimes you have to take risks to achieve real growth." Speaking of which, I had an interesting conversation with David Chen from Chen Financial last week. He mentioned they're looking to acquire smaller firms to expand their regional presence. My blood ran cold. Acquire? "Just exploratory talks," Tyler said casually. "But they're offering significant premiums for established client bases. We could all walk away very wealthy, start fresh somewhere else." Start fresh. Away from the employees who knew his history, away from the whispers and potential complaints. Tyler wasn't just planning to take over my company, he was planning to sell it and disappear with the profits. "Henderson and Associates isn't for sale," I said firmly. Tyler raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Of course not. I'm just saying it's worth considering all our options. The market won't stay this favorable forever." Margaret cleared her throat, clearly sensing the tension that had crept into the conversation. "This all sounds very exciting, but maybe we should talk about something else. Pamela, how's your book club going?" The conversation shifted to safer topics, but I spent the rest of the evening studying Tyler with new eyes. I watched how he controlled the flow of discussion, how he subtly redirected any topic that didn't serve his purposes. I noticed how he touched Pamela, possessively, proprietarily, as if she were something he owned rather than someone he loved. Most disturbing was the way he spoke about their future together. Everything was about what he wanted, where he saw them going, what he thought was best. Pamela's own opinions and desires were acknowledged with patronizing smiles and gentle corrections that slowly steered her back to his vision. "Tyler thinks we should wait a few more years before having children," Pamela said at one point. "He wants us to be more financially established first." "Smart thinking," Tyler said, squeezing her hand. "Children are expensive, and I want to be able to provide the best for our family. Besides, Pamela's still young. We have plenty of time." But I could see something in Pamela's eyes, a flicker of disappointment that she quickly hid. She wanted children now, I realized. She was 31, financially stable, married to a man she loved. There was no practical reason to wait, except that Tyler didn't want to be tied down by the responsibilities of fatherhood. As the evening wound down, Tyler walked us to the door while Pamela finished cleaning up in the kitchen. "Nathan," he said, his voice lower now, more serious, "I hope you'll give some real thought to what we discussed tonight. Change is never easy, but sometimes it's necessary for growth." "What kind of change are you really talking about, Tyler?" He smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. "The kind that recognizes when it's time for new leadership. You've built something impressive, but every founder eventually has to step aside for the good of the organization. And you think you're ready to take over. I think I'm ready to take Henderson and Associates to the next level. The question is whether you're ready to let that happen." There it was, laid out clearly. Preserve the original language of the text or collaborative leadership. He was demanding control of my company, my life's work, the legacy I'd hoped to leave to my daughter. "I appreciate your confidence," I said carefully, "but I'm not ready to retire." Tyler's expression hardened for just a moment before the charming smile returned. "Well, we'll see how things develop. Sometimes circumstances have a way of making these decisions for us." As Margaret and I drove home, she was unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke up. "Nathan, what's really going on between you and Tyler?" I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I had a plan that would protect both Pamela and the employees who depended on me. "Just some disagreements about the direction of the company," I said. It felt like more than that. There was something calculating about the way he was talking, like he'd already made decisions and was just waiting for the right moment to implement them. Margaret had always been perceptive. She'd sensed what I was only beginning to fully understand. Tyler wasn't just a predator preying on employees. He was a predator who had systematically infiltrated my family and my business with a long-term plan to take everything I'd built. The question was, what was I going to do about it? That night, as I lay in bed listening to Margaret's peaceful breathing, I made my decision. Tyler wanted a war for control of my company and my family. He thought he held all the advantages: my daughter's love, his position within the organization, his carefully crafted reputation as the perfect son-in-law. But Tyler had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me, and he had no idea that I knew exactly who he really was. Monday morning, I would begin fighting back. And this time, I wouldn't be the naive father-in-law who could be manipulated and pushed aside. This time, I would be ready for him. Monday morning came with the weight of absolute clarity. For the first time in a week, I knew exactly what I had to do. The challenge wasn't knowing the right course of action. It was executing it without destroying my daughter in the process. I arrived at the office before 6, when the building was still quiet and the security guard was the only other person around. I needed time to think, to plan, to prepare for what would be the most important week of my professional life. Bill Morrison had left a complete report on my desk over the weekend. Reading it was like watching a horror movie unfold in slow motion. Tyler's pattern went back even further than I'd thought. 10 years of calculated manipulation across 4 different companies. Young women, always young women, targeted and manipulated until they either submitted to his advances or were forced out of their jobs. The most chilling part was how systematic it all was. Preserve the original language of the text. The text would spend months establishing himself as a valuable employee, building relationships with management, creating a reputation as someone who was ambitious but trustworthy. Then he would identify vulnerable targets: single mothers, women supporting elderly parents, employees with financial pressures that made them dependent on their jobs. The psychological manipulation was always the same. First, he would establish a professional relationship, offering help with projects or career advice. Then came the personal attention, compliments on appearance, invitations to after-work drinks, gradually crossing professional boundaries while maintaining plausible deniability. The final stage was the trap, using his position of authority to create situations where the woman felt she had to choose between her job security and her personal autonomy. And if they resisted, if they threatened to report him, preserve the original language of the text as the credible professional whose word would be believed over theirs. Reading about Emma in this context made me realize how close we'd come to losing her entirely. Tyler had been setting up his approach for months, establishing himself as someone who could help or hurt her career, learning about her financial situation and her children's needs. The conversation I'd overheard was just the final move in a game he'd been playing since the day she was hired. But Tyler had made one crucial error this time. He'd gotten too comfortable, too confident in his ability to operate without detection. He hadn't counted on me being in the building that night, hadn't considered that someone might finally witness his true nature. Now I had to figure out how to use that knowledge without making Emma pay the price for my investigation. I started by calling our company attorney, Sarah Mitchell. Sarah had handled our legal needs for over a decade, and I trusted her completely. I asked her to come in early for a confidential consultation. "Nathan," she said as she settled into the chair across from my desk, "you sounded urgent on the phone. What's going on?" I need to know about our legal exposure if I remove Tyler from his position, I said directly. Specifically, what protections we have if he claims wrongful termination. Sarah frowned. Tyler's your son-in-law. Has something happened between you two? Something has happened, I said carefully. I've discovered information about Tyler's behavior that makes me believe he's unsuitable for his current position. I need to know how to proceed without opening the company to lawsuits. What kind of behavior are we talking about? I told her everything. Not just what I'd witnessed with Emma, but everything Bill Morrison had uncovered about Tyler's history. Sarah's expression grew more serious with each detail. This is a nightmare scenario, she said when I finished. If even half of what you're telling me is true, the company is already exposed to significant liability. The fact that Tyler has been in a supervisory position over female employees while engaging in this pattern of behavior. I know, I said. The question is how to minimize the damage going forward. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, making notes on her legal pad. You have several options, but they all carry risks. You could terminate Tyler immediately for cause, but he'll likely claim the real reason is personal rather than professional. You could transfer him to a position with no supervisory authority, but that might not solve the underlying problem. What would you recommend? Honestly, the cleanest solution might be to restructure his role in a way that removes him from any position where he could continue this behavior while documenting everything for potential legal proceedings. But Nathan, you need to understand that this is going to get messy. Tyler's not going to go quietly, especially if he realizes you know about his past. I spent the rest of the morning working on a plan. By noon, I had the framework of what I was going to propose to the board of directors. Henderson and Associates was structured as a small corporation with a 5-person board. Myself as majority shareholder and chairman, Margaret, my longtime business partner Jim Crawford, our accountant Rebecca Forn, and Tyler, who had been added to the board when he married Pamela. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. I would propose a company restructuring that appeared to be about growth and efficiency, but would actually remove Tyler from any position where he could harm employees. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday, exactly 1 week after I'd overheard that conversation in Tyler's office. But first, I had to protect Emma. I called her into my office that afternoon. She arrived looking nervous, clutching a notebook and pen as if she were preparing for a performance review. "Please, sit down," I said, trying to make my voice as gentle as possible. "I wanted to talk to you about your workload and responsibilities." Emma perched on the edge of the chair, her body language screaming anxiety. "Have I done something wrong, Mr. Henderson?" "Not at all. In fact, I've been very impressed with your work over the past 2 years, which is why I wanted to discuss a potential opportunity for you." I had spent hours crafting this conversation, trying to find a way to protect Emma without revealing what I knew. The solution I'd come up with wasn't perfect, but it would get her out of Tyler's reach immediately. "I've been thinking about restructuring some of our administrative functions," I continued. "Specifically, I'd like to create a new position, executive assistant to the chairman. It would involve working directly with me on high-level projects, managing my calendar and correspondence, and serving as a liaison with our most important clients." Emma's eyes widened. "That sounds like a significant promotion." "It would be. The position would come with a salary increase to $45,000 annually, plus additional benefits. But it would also mean relocating your office to the executive floor, working more closely with senior management." That sounds wonderful, but why me? I mean, I appreciate the opportunity, but because I need someone I can trust completely, I said, and I meant it. Someone who understands discretion, who pays attention to details, who can handle sensitive information appropriately. What I didn't say was that I needed to get her away from Tyler immediately before he could escalate his harassment or retaliate for whatever choice she'd made about his ultimatum. "When would this position start?" Emma asked. "Immediately, this afternoon if you're interested. I know it's sudden, but I have some urgent projects that require immediate attention." Emma looked overwhelmed but relieved. "Yes, Mr. Henderson, I would be very interested in this opportunity." Excellent. I'll have HR prepare the paperwork today. And Emma, I paused, trying to find the right words. If anyone questions this promotion or makes you feel uncomfortable about it in any way, I want you to come to me directly, no matter who it is or what they say. Something flickered in Emma's eyes, understanding perhaps, or at least recognition that I was offering her more than just a job promotion. I will, Mr. Henderson. Thank you. After Emma left, I called HR to expedite the paperwork for her promotion. Then I called building maintenance to arrange for her immediate relocation to an office on the executive floor, right next to mine. By 5 o'clock, Emma Rodriguez was no longer under Tyler's supervision, and she had a locked office where she could work without fear of unwanted visits. Tyler's reaction was swift and predictable. He appeared in my office at 5:15, his face carefully composed, but his eyes burning with barely controlled anger. "Nathan," he said, closing the door behind him, "I understand there's been some kind of mix-up with Emma Rodriguez's assignment." "No mix-up," I replied calmly. "I promoted her to executive assistant to the chairman. She starts immediately." "Without consulting me? She was assigned to my department. And now she's assigned to mine. Is there a problem with that?" Tyler's jaw tightened. "It just seems unusual to make such a significant personnel change without discussion. Emma was handling several important projects for me. I'm sure Jennifer can take over those projects, or Sarah from the paralegal pool. This is going to disrupt my entire workflow." I looked up from my computer, meeting Tyler's gaze directly. "I'm sure you'll adapt. You're very good at adapting to new circumstances." For a moment, Tyler's mask slipped completely. I saw the rage underneath, the fury of a predator whose prey had been moved out of reach. Then the charming smile returned, but it looked strange now, almost desperate. "Of course," he said. "I just hope this sudden promotion doesn't give Emma the wrong impression about advancement opportunities at the company. We wouldn't want her to develop unrealistic expectations." The threat was subtle but clear. Tyler was letting me know that he understood exactly what I was doing, and he was prepared to retaliate. "I think Emma understands her new responsibilities very clearly," I said, "and I'm confident she'll exceed expectations in her new role." That evening, I sat in my study with Tyler's personnel files spread across my desk. Tomorrow, I would begin the delicate process of documenting everything I'd learned, building a case that would justify his removal without revealing the true reasons to Pamela. The phone rang at 8 o'clock. It was Tyler. "Nathan, I've been thinking about our conversation today, about Emma's promotion." "What about it?" "I think there might be some misunderstanding about the situation. Maybe we should have lunch tomorrow, just the two of us, to clear the air." I almost laughed. Tyler was trying to manage me the same way he managed his victims, with charm, manipulation, and the suggestion that everything could be worked out if we just talked privately. "I don't think that's necessary, Tyler. The decision has been made." "I see." His voice was cooler now. "Well, I hope you understand that this kind of arbitrary decision-making doesn't reflect well on company leadership, especially when it affects employee morale and departmental efficiency." Another threat, this one barely disguised. Tyler was letting me know that he was prepared to undermine my authority if I continued to interfere with his activities. "Good night, Tyler," I said, and hung up. I spent the rest of the evening preparing for Friday's board meeting. The agenda I was creating would look routine to most of the board members: discussions of quarterly performance, budget allocations for the coming year, strategic planning initiatives. But buried within those mundane topics was a complete restructuring that would strip Tyler of his authority over employees while appearing to promote him to a more senior position. The key was making it look like a natural evolution of the company rather than a targeted action against Tyler. I would propose creating a new position, Director of Strategic Development, that would involve high-level planning and external relationship building, but no direct supervisory responsibilities. Tyler would be promoted out of his current role and into a position where he couldn't hurt anyone. It wasn't perfect, it didn't address his past behavior or hold him accountable for what he'd done. but it would protect current and future employees while buying me time to figure out how to handle the larger problem of his marriage to my daughter. As I reviewed my notes one final time, I thought about Emma, probably putting her children to bed right now, no longer afraid of what tomorrow might bring at work. I thought about Jennifer and Sarah and all the other young women in the office who didn't even know they'd been potential targets. And I thought about Tyler, probably lying in bed next to my daughter, planning his next move in what he undoubtedly saw as a chess game he was destined to win. He had no idea that the game was about to change completely. Friday's board meeting would look like a routine business discussion, but it would actually be the beginning of the end of Tyler Hoffman's career at Henderson and Associates. The question was whether I could execute my plan before Tyler realized what was happening and decided to escalate his war against me. Only 4 more days until I found out. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made everything seem possible. I had spent the entire week preparing for this moment, and as I walked into the conference room at exactly 9 o'clock, I felt a calm confidence I hadn't experienced in days. The board members were already seated around the polished oak table that had witnessed countless important decisions over the years. Margaret sat to my right, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the agenda I'd distributed. Jim Crawford, my business partner since the early days, was flipping through his copy of the quarterly reports. Rebecca Thorne, our accountant, had her laptop open and was already pulling up financial spreadsheets. And Tyler. Tyler sat directly across from me, impeccably dressed in a navy suit and red tie, his expression confident and relaxed. He had no idea what was coming. "Good morning, everyone," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "Thank you all for being here. We have a full agenda today, so let's get started." I began with the routine items: quarterly financial reports, client acquisition numbers, operational expenses. Rebecca walked us through the numbers, which were strong across all metrics. Henderson and Associates was performing well, which would make what I was about to propose seem like natural growth rather than crisis management. "The numbers look excellent," Jim said when Rebecca finished her presentation. "Revenue is up 18% over last year, and our client retention rate is holding steady at 92%. "Which brings us to our next agenda item," I said, pulling out the presentation I'd spent all week preparing: strategic planning for the next fiscal year. Tyler leaned forward slightly, his expression attentive. He was probably expecting me to announce my retirement. To hand over control of the company he'd been systematically planning to take over. "As we've grown," I continued, "it's become clear that our current organizational structure needs to evolve. We're at a point where we need more specialized leadership roles to handle our expanding client base and service offerings." I opened my laptop and activated the projector, displaying the first slide of my presentation. It showed our current organizational chart, a relatively simple structure with clear reporting lines and departmental divisions. "This has served us well," I said, "but I believe we need to think bigger, more strategically." The next slide showed my proposed restructuring. To anyone looking at it casually, it appeared to be a logical evolution: new positions that reflected growth and increased sophistication. But I had designed it with laser precision to solve one specific problem. "I'm proposing the creation of several new senior positions," I explained. "First, a director of strategic development, focused on identifying new market opportunities and developing long-term growth strategies. Second, an expanded client relations department with dedicated relationship managers for our largest accounts. And third, a complete restructuring of our internal operations to improve efficiency and employee satisfaction." Tyler's eyes were fixed on the organizational chart, and I could see him trying to figure out where he fit into this new structure. "The Director of Strategic Development position," I continued, "would be responsible for external relationship building, market analysis, and identifying potential partnerships or acquisition opportunities. It's a senior executive role that would require someone with strong analytical skills and the ability to represent the company at the highest levels." I paused, letting the implication sink in. "Tyler, I'd like you to consider taking on this role." Tyler blinked, clearly caught off guard. This wasn't what he'd been expecting. I'm honored by the offer, Nathan, but what about my current responsibilities? Those would be redistributed among the expanded client relations team. Jennifer Morrison would be promoted to Director of Client Relations, with Sarah Chan and Michael Torres serving as Senior Relationship Managers. This would allow for more personalized service and better coverage of our growing client base. Margaret looked confused. Nathan, this seems like a significant change. What's driving this restructuring? I had anticipated this question and prepared my answer carefully. Two things. First, our client feedback surveys have consistently indicated that they'd like more personalized attention and deeper strategic insights. Second, I believe we're not taking full advantage of our growth potential. We've been reactive rather than proactive in our market approach. And the internal operations restructuring? Rebecca asked. This was the most important part of my plan, the element that would protect employees like Emma without making it obvious that protection was needed. I'm proposing a complete overhaul of our HR policies and reporting structures, I said. Clear protocols for employee concerns, mandatory training for all supervisory personnel, and an anonymous reporting system for workplace issues. Additionally, I want to implement regular employee satisfaction surveys and exit interviews to ensure we're maintaining a positive work environment. Tyler's expression had shifted subtly. He was beginning to understand that this restructuring would remove his access to vulnerable employees while making it much harder for him to operate the way he had been. These changes seem extensive, Tyler said carefully. Don't you think we should consider implementing them gradually? I don't think we can afford to wait, I replied. The market is becoming increasingly competitive, and companies that don't adapt quickly get left behind. Besides, our employees deserve to work in an environment where they feel valued and protected. The word protected hung in the air for a moment. Tyler's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Jim Crawford spoke up. I like the strategic thinking, Nathan, but what's the timeline for implementation? I'd like to begin immediately. The Director of Strategic Development position would start on Monday, with the other changes rolling out over the next 2 weeks. Tyler leaned back in his chair, and I could see him calculating his options. He couldn't refuse the promotion without seeming ungrateful or suspicious, but accepting it would mean giving up his current power base and the access to employees he'd been exploiting. It's certainly an interesting opportunity, Tyler said slowly, but I'd need to understand the role better. What exactly would my day-to-day responsibilities look like? I had prepared for this question too. Market research, competitive analysis, identification of potential partnerships or acquisition targets. You'd be working primarily with external contacts, industry analysts, potential partners, business development consultants. There would be significant travel involved, probably 2 to 3 days per week. Travel, away from the office, away from the employees. Tyler was beginning to understand the full implications of what I was proposing. I see, he said. And the compensation structure for this position? A significant increase in base salary, plus performance bonuses tied to successful strategic initiatives. We're talking about a total compensation package in the range of $120,000 to $140,000 annually. Margaret looked impressed. That's very generous, Nathan. Strategic leadership commands a premium, I replied, and Tyler has the qualifications to excel in this role. What I didn't say was that the compensation increase was deliberate. It would make Tyler's eventual departure from the company less financially devastating for Pamela, while also making it harder for him to claim he was being demoted. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he spoke. I appreciate the confidence you're showing in me, Nathan, but I have to ask, what prompted this sudden restructuring? Is there something specific that's driving these changes? The question was loaded. Tyler was probing to see if I knew about his activities, if this restructuring was targeted specifically at him. Nothing sudden about it, I said evenly. I've been thinking about these changes for months. The Emma Rodriguez promotion was actually the beginning of this process. I realized we needed better systems for identifying and developing talent. Tyler's expression flickered at the mention of Emma's name. He understood the message I was sending. "Well," Tyler said finally, "I suppose I should be flattered that you think I'm the right person for such an important role." "I do," I said. "The question is whether you're ready to take on this level of responsibility." It was a challenge, and we both knew it. Tyler could accept the promotion and lose his ability to prey on employees, or he could resist and risk exposing his real motivations. "I'd like to review the detailed job description and expectations," Tyler said, "but in principle, yes, I'm interested." "Excellent," I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "I'll have HR prepare the paperwork today." The rest of the meeting proceeded smoothly. The board approved the restructuring unanimously, impressed by what appeared to be forward-thinking leadership and strategic planning. Margaret and Jim both complimented me on the thoroughness of the proposal. Rebecca was already calculating the budget implications and seemed pleased with the projected return on investment. The text participated in the remaining discussions, but I could see his mind working, trying to figure out how to regain the advantage he was losing. As the meeting concluded, he lingered while the other board members filed out. "Nathan," he said when we were alone, "I want you to know I appreciate this opportunity. I hope this signals a new level of trust and collaboration between us." "I hope so too, Tyler." He studied my face for a moment, searching for something. "I also hope that recent misunderstandings haven't affected your confidence in my judgment. Sometimes situations can be misinterpreted, taken out of context." There it was, Tyler's attempt to gauge whether I knew about his harassment of Emma. He was giving me an opening to address it directly, probably hoping to control the narrative. "I think clear communication prevents most misunderstandings," I replied. "And I'm confident that our new organizational structure will eliminate any potential for confusion about roles and responsibilities." Tyler nodded slowly. "I'm sure it will." As he gathered his papers and headed for the door, Tyler paused and turned back. "By the way, how is Emma adjusting to her new position? I hope the transition hasn't been too difficult for her." The question was another probe, an attempt to determine how much I knew about their interactions. "Emma is exceeding expectations," I said. "She seems much more comfortable in her new role. Sometimes a change of environment is exactly what someone needs." Tyler's smile was thin. "Yes, sometimes change is exactly what's needed." After he left, I sat alone in the conference room, looking out at the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The first phase of my plan had succeeded. Tyler had been effectively neutralized as a threat to current employees. But I knew this was just the beginning. Preserve the original language of the text, who accepted defeat gracefully. He would regroup, reassess, and look for new ways to regain control. The Director of Strategic Development position would keep him busy and away from vulnerable employees, but it wouldn't address the fundamental problem of his character. More importantly, it wouldn't protect my daughter from the man she'd married. As I packed up my materials from the meeting, my phone buzzed with a text message from Pamela. "Tyler just called to tell me about his promotion. We're so excited. Dinner Sunday to celebrate?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Tyler was already spinning this as a victory, probably telling Pamela that he'd been recognized for his contributions and elevated to a senior executive role. She had no idea that her husband had just been systematically stripped of his ability to harm people. I typed back, "Congratulations! Sunday dinner sounds perfect." But as I sent the message, I wondered how long I could keep protecting Pamela from the truth about Tyler. The man she loved, the man she was planning to have children with, was a predator, and sooner or later she was going to have to face that reality. For now, though, I had bought time. Emma was safe. The other female employees were safe, and Tyler was contained, at least temporarily. The question was, what would he do next? I had a feeling I wouldn't have to wait long to find out. 3 months later, I was working late in my office when Emma knocked on my door. It was after 7 in the evening, and most of the staff had gone home. But Emma often stayed late to help me prepare for the next day's meetings. "Mr. Henderson," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk, "I wanted to thank you again for everything you've done for me." "You've earned every opportunity you've received, Emma. Your work has been exceptional." And it had been. In her new role as executive assistant to the chairman, Emma had flourished in ways that amazed me. She was intelligent, dedicated, and had a natural instinct for business that I'd never had the chance to see when she was buried in Tyler's department doing routine administrative work. "I know you didn't have to create this position for me," she said quietly, "and I know you didn't have to get me away from certain situations." I looked up from my computer. Emma and I had never directly discussed what had happened with Tyler, but there was an understanding between us, a recognition of what had been prevented. "Everyone deserves to work in an environment where they feel safe and valued," I said. Emma nodded. "That's why I wanted to tell you something about Tyler and what's been happening since the restructuring." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "I've been keeping an eye on things, talking to the other women in the office. Jennifer in client relations, Sarah in the paralegal pool, even some of the newer employees. Tyler's been frustrated by his new role." "Frustrated how?" "He's been making comments about how the company is being mismanaged, how the new organizational structure is inefficient. But more than that, he's been asking questions about people's personal lives, trying to find out who's having financial problems, who might be vulnerable." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Has he approached anyone directly?" "Not yet. But Jennifer thinks he's testing the waters, trying to figure out how to operate under the new system. She said he offered to help her with some personal financial planning last week, wanted to take her to lunch to discuss investment strategies." The pattern was depressingly familiar. Tyler was looking for new ways to create the intimate, one-on-one situations that he used to manipulate women. "I wanted you to know," Emma continued, "because I think you should be prepared. Tyler isn't going to give up easily." That weekend, the Tyler and Pamela came over for the Sunday dinner we'd been having monthly since his promotion. Tyler had been playing his new role perfectly, talking enthusiastically about market analysis and strategic partnerships. But I could see the frustration underneath, the anger of a predator who'd been caged. "The travel schedule is more demanding than I expected," Tyler was saying as we sat around the dinner table. "I'm on the road at least 3 days every week now, sometimes 4. "That must be hard on the marriage," Margaret said sympathetically. "It is," Pamela agreed, and I caught something in her voice. Not just loneliness, but relief. "I've actually been enjoying having some time to myself, though. I've been taking those art classes I always talked about." "Art classes?" I asked, surprised. Pamela had mentioned wanting to take art classes years ago, but Tyler had always discouraged it, saying it was a waste of time and money. "Watercolor painting," she said, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. "I know it sounds silly, but I've actually gotten pretty good at it. I sold 3 paintings at a local gallery last month." Tyler's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "It's a nice hobby," he said dismissively, "though I hope it's not interfering with more important responsibilities." "What could be more important than pursuing something that makes you happy?" Margaret asked. "Well, we've been talking about starting a family," Tyler said, reaching over to take Pamela's hand. "I think Pamela's energy should be focused on preparing for that." But Pamela didn't look at Tyler when he said this. Instead, she looked down at her plate, and I saw something I'd been missing for months. My daughter was not happy in her marriage. After dinner, while Tyler and Margaret were in the kitchen discussing his latest business trip, I found Pamela alone on the back porch, staring out at the garden. "Tell me about these art classes," I said, settling into the chair beside her. "They're wonderful, Dad. I go twice a week, and I've made some amazing friends. There's this group of women, and we sometimes get together outside of class to paint landscapes or visit galleries." "Tyler doesn't mind you spending so much time away from home?" Pamela was quiet for a moment. Tyler doesn't really understand why I need space. He thinks a wife should be focused on her husband and home. What do you think?" She looked at me then, and I saw something I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. Uncertainty about her choices, doubt about the path she was on. "I think I've forgotten who I am," she said quietly. "I used to have opinions about things, dreams about what I wanted to do with my life. But somehow, over the past few years, all of that has been diminished." "Diminished how?" "Tyler has very strong opinions about what's best for our future, and whenever I suggest something different, he explains why my idea won't work, why his way is better. He's usually right, I guess, but sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing." My heart broke a little, hearing my strong, independent daughter describe the gradual erosion of her self-confidence. This was part of Tyler's pattern too, not just the overt harassment of employees, but the subtle manipulation of his wife, making her dependent on his judgment and approval. "Pamela," I said carefully, "do you ever feel like Tyler tries to control your decisions?" She was quiet for a long time. "I know you've never been entirely comfortable with Tyler," she finally said. "But Dad, marriage is about compromise, about considering your partner's perspective." "It's about considering each other's perspectives," I corrected gently. "Does Tyler consider yours?" Before she could answer, Tyler appeared in the doorway. "There you are," he said to Pamela, his tone light but with an edge underneath. "I was wondering where you'd gotten to." "Just talking with Dad," Pamela said, standing up quickly, almost guiltily. "Well, we should probably get going. I have an early flight tomorrow, and I need to finish packing." As they prepared to leave, Tyler shook my hand with that same charming smile he'd always used. "Thanks for dinner, Nathan, and thanks again for the opportunity to take on this new role. I know the travel is demanding, but I'm committed to making it work." "I'm sure you are," I said, but I was watching Pamela as I said it, seeing how she seemed to shrink slightly in Tyler's presence, how she deferred to his timeline and decisions without question. That night, I called Bill Morrison, the private investigator who'd helped me understand Tyler's background. "I need you to look into something else," I told him. "I want to know where Tyler Hoffman is really going on these business trips. I want to know who he's meeting with, what he's actually doing." "You think he's not doing the job you assigned him?" "I think Tyler Hoffman is incapable of doing any job that doesn't give him opportunities to manipulate people. I want to know what opportunities he's creating for himself." The answer came back within 2 weeks. Tyler wasn't attending most of the business meetings I'd set up for him. Instead, he was spending his travel time interviewing for positions at other companies, specifically companies where he could return to a supervisory role over employees. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that Tyler had been telling potential employers that he was unhappy with the family business politics at Henderson and Associates, that he'd been passed over for promotions despite his qualifications, and that he was looking for an organization that would appreciate his leadership abilities. He was positioning himself as the victim of nepotism and family favoritism, laying the groundwork to leave Henderson and Associates while damaging my reputation in the process. I was still processing this information when Emma knocked on my office door on a Thursday afternoon. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her face pale with worry, "I think you need to know about something that happened today." "What is it?" "Tyler came by my office this morning. He said he wanted to congratulate me on my success in my new position, but then he started asking very personal questions about my children, about my financial situation, about whether I was happy with my current responsibilities." My blood ran cold. "What did you tell him?" "I kept the conversation professional, but he was persistent. He suggested that we have lunch to discuss my career development, said he might be able to help me transition to a position with better growth opportunities." "What kind of position?" He was vague about the details, but he mentioned that he was exploring new opportunities himself, and that he might be able to bring valuable employees with him to a new organization. Tyler was recruiting. He was trying to identify employees he could take with him when he left, employees he could manipulate in a new environment where I wouldn't be there to protect them.
"Emma," I said, "I need you to document everything Tyler said to you today. Write it down exactly as you remember it." "Should I be worried?" "Not as long as you stay here. But yes, I think Tyler is planning something, and I want to make sure we're prepared." That evening, I made a decision that had been weighing on me for months. I couldn't protect Pamela from the truth anymore. She deserved to know who she was married to, even if it destroyed her faith in her own judgment. I called her and asked her to come over the next evening, alone. "Dad, you're scaring me," she said when she arrived, finding me in my study with Tyler's complete files spread across my desk. "Sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk." I told her everything. About what I'd overheard that night in Tyler's office. About his history at previous companies. About the pattern of harassment and manipulation that followed him wherever he went. About how I'd restructured the company to protect employees from him. Pamela listened in stunned silence, her face growing paler with each revelation. "You're telling me," she said when I finished, "that my husband is a predator?" "I'm telling you that Tyler has a documented history of using his professional position to manipulate vulnerable women. And I'm telling you that he's been systematically undermining your confidence and independence since the day you married him." "But he loves me," she said, but her voice was uncertain. "Does he? Or does he love what you represent? Access to this company, to this family, to a lifestyle he couldn't achieve on his own?" Pamela was quiet for a long time, staring at the documents on my desk. Finally, she spoke. "The art classes," she said quietly. "What about them?" "Tyler hates them. He says they're a waste of time, that I should be focusing on preparing to be a mother instead of pursuing silly hobbies. But when I'm painting, when I'm with those women who encourage me and listen to my ideas, that's the only time I feel like myself anymore." I waited, letting her work through the implications. "He's been sabotaging my friendships too," she continued, almost to herself. "Whenever I make plans with girlfriends, he finds reasons why I should cancel. He says he misses me when I'm gone, that he needs me at home. I thought it was romantic. And now? Now I think it was control." She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "Dad, how could I have been so blind?" "Tyler is very good at what he does, sweetheart. He's had years of practice manipulating people, making them doubt their own instincts." Pamela was quiet for several more minutes. When she spoke again, her voice was stronger. "What do I do now?" "That's your decision to make. But I want you to know that whatever you decide, you have my complete support. And you have options: financial independence, a career at the company if you want it, or resources to pursue whatever makes you happy." 3 weeks later, Pamela moved back into her childhood bedroom. She'd confronted Tyler with what she'd learned, and his response had been everything I'd expected: denial, followed by manipulation, followed by rage when those tactics failed. Tyler submitted his resignation the day after Pamela left him, claiming that family conflicts made it impossible for him to continue in his position. His final act was attempting to recruit Emma and 2 other female employees to join him at his new job, proving that he'd learned nothing from our restructuring. None of them took his offer. 6 months later, I was sitting in my office when Emma knocked on my door. She was carrying a manila envelope and wearing the kind of smile that suggested good news. "Mr. Henderson," she said, "I wanted to show you something." She handed me the envelope. Inside was a letter from the State Bar Association, confirming Emma's acceptance into the evening law program at the local university. "I've been thinking about what you said," she explained, "about how everyone deserves to work in an environment where they feel safe and valued. I want to become an employment attorney to help other women who find themselves in situations like I was in." "That's wonderful, Emma. The company will support your education in any way we can." "Actually," she said, "I was hoping you'd consider letting me work part-time while I'm in school. I'd like to stay here to be part of building the kind of workplace culture that protects people." As I looked at Emma, confident, determined, no longer the frightened young woman who'd been cornered by Tyler, I thought about how sometimes the worst situations can reveal the best in people. Pamela had enrolled in business school and was planning to join the company full-time after her divorce was finalized. She discovered that she had excellent instincts for strategic planning and client relations, skills that had been suppressed during her marriage but were now flourishing. Tyler had found a new job at a mid-sized firm across town. I'd heard through industry contacts that there were already whispers about his behavior, that the patterns were beginning to emerge again. But that was no longer my responsibility. My responsibility was to the people in my care, to the employees who depended on me to create a safe environment where they could thrive. And for the first time in months, I felt confident that I was succeeding in that responsibility. The price of trust, I'd learned, wasn't just about the damage that could be done when that trust was misplaced. It was also about the healing that was possible when trust was rebuilt on a foundation of truth, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Looking back, I realized that discovering Tyler's true nature had been the beginning, not the end, of my real work as a leader and as a father. Sometimes, protecting the people you love means making difficult decisions, having painful conversations, and accepting that not all relationships can be saved. But sometimes, those decisions also create space for new growth, new strength, and new possibilities that never could have existed in the shadow of manipulation and fear. As I watched Emma head back to her office, already planning her future as an advocate for workplace justice, I knew I'd made the right choices. The price of trust had been high, but the reward, seeing the people I cared about discover their own strength and potential, was immeasurable. Tyler Hoffman had taught us all an important lesson, though not the one he'd intended. He'd shown us that real strength isn't about controlling others or manipulating situations for personal gain. Real strength is about using your power to protect people, to create opportunities for them to grow, and to build something bigger than yourself. And that was a lesson I planned to keep teaching for as long as I had the privilege to lead.